Let's go to the book of Mark. Hello, everybody. Let's get this business going. Mark chapter 2. Stay standing for a little bit. Let's read this together. Mark chapter 2. We're going to start from verse 1. We'll probably go to about 9 or 12. Happy post-Thanksgiving, everybody. All right. Verse 2. Jesus returned to Capernaum, and a few days later, the news went out that he was at home. So many people gathered together that there was no room for them, not even near the door. And Jesus was discussing with them the word of God. Then they came, bringing to him a paralyzed man who was being carried by 4 men. When they were able to get to him because of the crowd, they removed the roof above Jesus, and they had dug out an opening and let down the mat on which the paralyzed man was lying. When Jesus saw their active faith springing from confidence in him, he said to the paralyzed man, Son, your sins are forgiven." Verse 6 reads, "But some of the scribes were standing there debating in their hearts the implications of what he had said. Why does this man talk this way, that way? He is blaspheming. Who can forgive sins, removing guilt, nullifying sin's penalty, and assigning righteousness except for God alone?" Immediately, Jesus, being fully aware of their hostility and knowing in his spirit what they were thinking, this, said to them, "Why are you debating and arguing about these things in your hearts? Which is easier to say to the paralyzed man, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Get up, pick up your mat and walk'? But so that you may know that the Son of Man has the authority and power on earth to forgive sins, he said to the paralyzed man, 'I say to you, get up, pick up your mat, and go home.'" I want you to look at the person next to you and give them a compliment. Come on, maybe give the person behind you a compliment. You should have been standing to begin with. Come on, let them see you in all of your glory. Everybody received a compliment so far? Were you complimented? Now say to them, "I've got a question for you. You look good, but I've got a question for you. You smell good, but I've got a question for you. You're presenting well, but I've got a question for you." That question that I want you to ask that person next to you is this, and I want you to ask them as loud as you possibly can. Who sent you? Because the deception oftentimes is that my appearance of looking good, you automatically assume that my intent or my origin in showing up was good. You may be seated. I know it is easy to judge a person and a thing based on how it appears. But really, who sent you? What is your intent for coming to this place? What's your purpose for being in my life? Why are you texting me and calling me? And why do we have what we have defined as this friendship? Who sent you? What is it that you are about as we are trying to build and in the process of building? Who sent you? I'm aware of what my limitations are, but who sent you? Who sent you? I wanted you to ask them, and you didn't wait for them to answer. And that's often our problem. We take it for granted that because I laugh and smile with you that my intentions are all right, but who sent you? What are you here for? Why do you show up in my life? Why are you in my friend circle? Why are you among the first set of people that I call or you call? Who sent you? So we are journeying through this story in the book of Mark that chronicles a whole bunch of things. But in the portion of scripture that we just read, it tells the story of the fame of Jesus coming to Capernaum. What was happening just prior to Jesus was in Galilee, and he did the whole fancy thing and turned water into wine, and people became excited. And his fame grew, and so when he came to Capernaum, people heard about it, heard about his presence being there, and they automatically gravitated to where he was. Much like what happened in the introduction of All Nations to New York. People heard about what was happening and they came, but who sent you? You heard about the fame of what was happening. You heard about a man, and we became, as a city, as a state, we became excited about the reality that this person and this move that we were attached to and flirting with from a distance was now present. And so we showed up because it was fresh. But who sent you? And what were your intentions in coming? So this is a story of this man who does not have the activity of his limbs. He can't do anything for himself. And later we'll talk about the fact that, I'm not going to tell you what we're going to talk about, but we'll get there. I want you to consider right now who you would consider your friends. Who's in your inner circle? Who's in your close friends on Instagram? Who sent you? Friend, or a friend by definition, addresses or talks about someone, a person who you know or who we get to know, with whom there is a mutual bond of affection. Are we friends? We have this in common. But sometimes we can be deceived because we build and have been guilty of building friendships on the grounds of common trauma. But who sent you? Were you sent to provoke me in the area of my trauma, or were you sent to help get me out of it? Were you sent to remind me why I hate this person, or were you sent to bring me into the place of accountability? Were you sent to help me in my state of my paralytic state where I can depend upon a handout, or were you sent to challenge me to move from this place of being paralyzed and dependent upon everything and everybody else, and push me to the place of realization that I really have more than I think that I have? Who sent you? The definition says there's a common bond of affection, but it does not include family. We're not talking about family because you don't determine that. You're born into that, except, of course, our friends that we say become family after time. So it is a decision that we make concerning who we share our time and space with. It has nothing to do with the people that we share intimate sexual encounters with. That's by definition our family relations. So it's not your sneaky links that we have. That's not your friend. Talking about the definition of the word friend. That's what it says. Typically exclusive of sexual or family relation. It's a choice and a decision. It is a person who is not an enemy, or one who is on the same side. We have this thing in common. It is a backer, the person that I can call on to support me. It is a benefactor. And in studying one of the words that friend is associated with is an angel. Amos 3:3 says, do two people walk hand in hand if they aren't going to the same place? That's the Message translation. Some other translations will say, how can two walk unless there be agreement? And so I'm not talking or addressing the ones that you have to sit and second guess whether or not this is a friend or a foe. It is not you're my friend today and tomorrow you are not, because based on what we see and what this graphic depicts, if I am at a state where I can't walk, I don't have the activity of my limbs, I'm not interested in the ones who were just around when it was convenient for them. I'm trying to find the ones as I close the year that if perchance I lose the activity of my limbs, I know who I can call on. I'm looking for the ones that will look at the fact that the room is crowded and I can't physically get to my answer and my deliverance, but they're not going to abandon me premature of me coming into the victory that I need to get up from this place of being paralyzed. And so it's not the casual friend and relationship that we're talking about. Who sent you? 2 Corinthians 11 verse 14 says, I just mentioned the fact that the word friend is equated to the word angel. 2 Corinthians 11:14 says, and no wonder, since Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. He is the friend that pops up and looks good with a hidden agenda. Who sent you? That's why we can't judge everything on the surface level, because it could appear like Satan to be an angel of light. But beyond this casual appearance and encounter, there is an agenda that's at work that if we don't examine and ask the question, who sent you? What are your intentions? We could be led in deception for a very long time. And there are people who live their entire lives in deception, calling people friends that are enemies disguised, calling things good that were bad, calling darkness light when it presents because it soothes an immediate need. Who sent you? Psalm 119. We're going to get to this in a little bit. But 119, 63 and 64 says, because you have satisfied me, God, I promise to do everything you say. I beg you from the bottom of my heart, smile. Be gracious to me just as you promised. When I took a long, careful look at your ways, I got my feet back on the trail you blazed. I was up at once, didn't drag my feet, was quickly to follow your orders. The wicked hemmed me in. There was no way out, but not for a minute did I forget your plan for me. I get up in the middle of the night to thank you. Your decisions are so right, so true. I can wait till morning. I'm a friend and a companion of all who fear me. For those committed to living by your rules, your love, God, fills the earth. Train me to live by your counsel. And what we just read is the description of what we called, or what we should be calling or assessing, this friendship that we have with Jesus. Because if we call him friend, it is not authenticated until we do what he says. It is not authenticated until we agree with what he has spoken, regardless of what it looks like, because we understand that his intentions for us are good and they are pure. We are not pulled out of that relationship when something goes wrong. We're not pulled out of that relationship when a leg is broken. We're not pulled out of that relationship when a sin is committed, because what we were encouraged and invited into by way of this friendship with Jesus had more to do with his decision about us than it had to do with what we could do for ourselves. But we received that. Mark 1:21 to 28 records Jesus' teaching in the synagogues and what was happening. There was a dramatic event that happened in the chapter before what we read, where Jesus encountered the demon-possessed man and he commanded him out, and he came out violently. It was extremely dramatic, much like what we have seen in this house and much like the drama that you have faced in your life and in your friendships. And so he addressed the demon-possessed and commanded the demons out, and the man shrieked, and all of this happened, and people were amazed at the fact that this was happening. Again, it drew attention to Jesus. What we were reading earlier in Mark 2 introduces the story where people began to gather without invitation. Their motive for coming to him and crowding the room was because of what they had heard. Because not many of them would have seen it, because that miracle had happened in a different place. And so just like gossip, it traveled. The news of what Jesus was doing was traveling faster than Jesus was able to move from one place to another. And so by the time he could move from Galilee to Capernaum, the news of what he was capable of, the power that he had, the authority that was demonstrated had gone ahead of it, and people became curious. And curiosity allowed them to put themselves in the place where he was. But who sent you? I know you're in my corner now, but are you here because of the good things you have heard? Or are you here because you think I can connect you to your next? Who sent you? Are you here because of what everybody else is saying? Or are you here because you were sent by God? Who sent you? Because if I can determine and understand who sent you, if that sending was a pure one, then I don't have to worry about your leaving. What if the friendships that you cried over were never sent by God? What if the doors that were closed were never opened by God? What if the job that you did not get was one that was created by the counterfeit light, but you were crying over what God closed that he did not send, because you thought that because it looked good that it was God? So they gathered because they heard what was happening. Mark 2 places Jesus' return from Galilee, like I said, and he entered. And so sometimes we need to understand that your arrival to a place will not require an announcement to attract an audience. I said your arrival to a place oftentimes will not require an announcement of your arrival to attract an audience. Because there's some who will come to verify that what they heard was the truth. Some will come to question and assess if what the gossip on the street was is really what was happening to you. I heard you were sick, and so I came to see you and to bring you some flowers, but your intent was not ready to bring flowers. You came to check if what the people were saying was the truth. And I'm deceived by your flowers because they smell good. But underneath the smelling of the flowers and how beautiful it appears, there's an agenda that you came with that we can often take for granted. But we're not closing 2024 in ignorance, because I want to know, why are you here? Because peradventure in 2025 I hit a hump in the road and I lose the activity of the limbs. What happens when I can no longer do for you what you are attracted to in my space? Will you still be present? What happens when the resources dry up? What happens when the handouts that I was able to give to you are no longer available? Are you still present? Who sent you? So this is an invitation of an assessment, because you don't know what is about to hit you. But what you absolutely need to be aware of, what we absolutely need to be aware of, is the motive and the agenda of the people that are around you. It's easy to become excited with numbers. But if you ask Gideon, The numbers didn't mean anything because their hearts, they weren't doing it the right way. And until you're doing it the right way, until, according to Amos, that we are in agreement concerning the direction that this thing is going, then I'm not so excited about the numbers in the absence of the agreement. And so I want to know, before this year ends, all nations, who sent you? What are you here for? Why is your friend your friend? Why is your close circle your close circle? Who sent you? And so in every season and with every opportunity, it becomes your responsibility to decipher or to set aside, to know what is the motive of those that are around you. Matter of fact, if you start with yourself, why are you friends with the people that you are friends with? Why are you a part of this house when you have several options? And so it is an invitation that we would sit with first ourselves, and then we would do an assessment of those things and people and places that are around us, because we want to ensure that we are moving to the future with the right resources, the right connections, the right people, the right every single thing that we need, so that we are not self-sabotaging because we open a door that filled an immediate need but was killing us as it relates to our destiny. I'm feeling something that my flesh wants right now, but on the other end of this immediate gratification, it is killing the purposes of God in my life. I know you are on the phone with me when I want to cry, and you're telling me why I should hate and why I should be angry at this. But when are you going to tell me to stop crying over what you have no control over? Pull yourself together, get yourself back in the fight, and keep going. I want the kind of people who will be around me that will say, all right, now pull it together. You've been crying long enough. You've been low long enough. You've been at this place long enough. All right, I'm going to get you from this place from point A to point B. But I promise you, when you get to point B, there's a responsibility for yourself that you've got to take that I cannot do for you. Who sent you? And why are you here? What's your motive? The Bible tells us that, brothers, we're going to get to this, don't worry. Brothers were born for adversity. And friendship shouldn't be established based on personal convenience. Because the truth is, nobody wants to be corrected, really. I know we say that we want to be corrected, but when we are corrected, we get an attitude. Because we want to convince everybody that our way is the right way. But if you're in a friend group and nobody can correct you, then there's a problem. Because why are you here? If you're not challenging me to be better, why are you here? If you're not helping me to get out of my paralytic state, why are you here? Brothers were born for adversity. And so friendship should not be established based on personal convenience. Yeah, it's all right for us to agree. But in that agreement, I want you to challenge me. In that agreement, I want you to say, I know you're here, but your help is that way. You've got to move in that direction. I know you're crippled, but there's an answer on the other side of this crowd. There's an answer on the other side of this struggle. There's a solution on the other side of this mountain that you must climb. But even if it takes everything that's within you, you've got to muster enough courage on the inside to get from where you are to where the answers are waiting. Jesus was in the house. He was locked out. So he had to move from where he was to get to the answer. But because of his condition, he could not do it himself. And here comes 4. We don't know how he became paralyzed. There are a couple of ways that it could have happened, but we don't know. And so one of the ways that that this particular disease could happen is in the birthing process, in childbirth. And because the Bible doesn't tell us how and or when he became paralyzed, there are a couple of things that we could assume or sit with. Number one, if he was paralyzed from birth, it means the only thing he knew his entire life was to be carried. Flip the script where that's concerned. If he's paralyzed from birth, and there are 4 people who have assessed his life and his case, who he could not do anything for, but they were willing to step in the middle of his incapacity of what he could not do and still stick around for his entire life. But what if he did not become paralyzed in birth and he had an accident? Because that's one of the other ways. An injury, a gunshot or a knife wound could paralyze a person to this point. So it means that there's a possibility at one point in his life and his story, he may have been the one that was helping and or carrying somebody else. But then the script flipped and something happened that he could no longer do what he was able to do for himself or others. But there were still 4 that were willing to stick with him while he could no longer do for them what he may have been able to do for them in the past. Who sent you? Because if you're only around when I can help you, it's a question that I must ask myself and ask you. But the beautiful thing about not knowing is either way, he needed somebody to do for him what he could not do for himself. The amazing thing about that is there was no way that he could have rewarded them. So they were not in it for what they can get. Who sent you? Who sent you and why are you here? What are you trying to get out of this friendship? What are you trying to get of your friendships? What are you trying to get of your relations that you have? And so verse 3 tells us that the cripple was sick of palsy. That's what it was. And it's a medical term for partial or complete loss of muscle function. There's a possibility that absolutely no movement could come from him. But as bad as his case was, there were 4 people who were willing to stick with him. It says it's muscle weakness or paralysis, and it affects the nerves that connects the spine, so that the arm and the hand and even the shoulder could not move. He couldn't feel. He could not feel. He could not move. It was so bad that even if you dropped something on his leg, he would not know. He could be bleeding and not feel. He could be injured to the point of death and not feel because of the condition that he was in, and all the nerves were gone. But there were 4 people who surveyed his current situation and made a decision. We talked about the fact that friendships are a decision. They looked at what he could not do for himself. They considered what he could not do for them. And they decided that I'm going to still stand and stick with this man who cannot do anything for me in this moment. I want to ask us the question, what do you do when the people that you have gravitated to because they could help you? They can give you your next come up. They can give you your next help, Pastor Rich, because you can put them on a track, on an album. And then you can no longer do it for them. Where are they? Where are the ones that you carried when their strength was not there? Where are the ones that you fed when there was no money in their accounts, when there was no food in their cupboards, and you were feeding and giving alms to everybody and everything around you? And though your intent was not to measure how much you had given and what you're going to receive in return, where are they? The question is not just where are they. It may just be they were not sent by him. What if you were casting your pearls to swine all along? What if you were feeding the hand that would turn around and bite you? What if you were building a home for the same person and place that would then beat against the foundation of what you have built? Sometimes it's not only them. Sometimes the problem is you. Sometimes you want to be pacified more than you want to be obedient, because God told you don't build there anyway. God told you don't call that person anyway. God told you don't put your money there anyway. God told you not to invest in this thing anyway. But because it looked right, it felt right, and it smelled right in the moment, because you were at a low place, you invested and wasted resources in something that was not sent by God. And so we end up crying over things that we should and could have avoided because we want to be nice. But I don't want you to be nice. I want you to be sure. I want you to be sure in the next group of people you call friends. I want you to be sure in the next place that you come to worship. And so if I know that God has sent me to this house, when I show up, I don't care who else does not show up. I know why I am here. And the Lord challenged me some time ago after we had, I think this was 2019, Apostle had preached the message. I talked about it in the video, the closet that counts, and I was journeying with the Lord. Actually, I was not. I was trying to distance myself from everything, and pulled myself out of the place of prayer and intercession and the whole works, because it was a lot. And the Lord challenged me. That was a Tuesday evening. Apostle preached that message. I think it was the 17th or the 16th, whatever it was. And the Lord challenged me to go back to the place of prayer immediately. So 5 a.m. the next day, immediately acted on the word of the Lord, because he was speaking to me. Acted on the word and put myself back on the wheel of obedience where prayer was concerned, and began to challenge myself to the place of prayer at 5 a.m. I was doing it every Wednesday morning. And after a while, it was growing. People were joining. We were praying. The whole works was happening. But after the pandemic lifted and people became busy again, people stopped showing up the way that they did. And I began to become frustrated with the Lord, not with the Lord, with the people. And contemplated, you know what, I'm going to shut this down. I could pray by myself. I don't need anybody else. I'm just not even going to do it. And the Lord said to me, I didn't call them to do it, I called you. So even if they don't show up, I called you. Even if they don't ever get on the line again, I called you. Even if you've got to do it by yourself, I've called you. And so if we run the risk of measuring obedience by numbers and whoever else shows up or does not show up, what we are doing is pulling ourselves out of the grace that was designed to cover us in the place of obedience. And so I had to talk myself back into obedience, because the instruction was to me. And so what was happening in this moment is that they've decided to remain close to this man who could do nothing for him. Verse 4 tells us, the right friend will get in the middle between the answers and the problem. At the beginning of the scripture, it says the room was so full that they could not enter. When we journey to the end of the scripture, it says the man got up and walked out. Think about it. At the beginning, there was no place for him to get into the room. How suddenly there's room that he can get out? What if the resistance that you feel to get to your next level was designed by God to see how much you're willing to press? Because where did the room suddenly come from after he was healed? Where was the space created from after my introduction or my attempt in my low place? I entered resistance. But now that I have strength, it's easy. That's what it says. When he came, the 4 guys brought him. There was no space for him to even get through the door. But suddenly they cracked the roof open and they did all they did, and there's room for him, not just for him and his bed. What are you doing with your resistance? What are we doing with the resistance that we feel? So, help me, y'all. The right friend will get in the middle of you and the problem and the answer. So if the answer stands there and I am the obstacle and you are the friend who needs help, what that friend will do is get in the middle to contend with the opposition that you feel, so that when you are fighting, that friend will show up. That fourth person, those four people will show up to ensure that you don't stay in the place of depression, will ensure that you don't stay in the place of isolation, will ensure that you don't stay in the place where you will die because you don't get the help that you need. Show me the people around you that are willing to show up and help you fight through what stands before you and the answer. Who is willing to stand between you and the answers that you seek and the deliverance that you need? They did not even allow the fact that there was no room to stop them. What they said was, hey, this looks impossible, but let's figure something out. This looks like it can't happen, but I know what I heard, that this man could heal. And even though it doesn't look likely, it doesn't look possible, we're going to still give it a shot. And even if it's our last shot, I'm going to ensure that because I was sent by God to this house, I'm going to ensure that I was sent by God to this friendship that we now have, that I'm going to stand and fight with you even if it is our last shot. Because peradventure, if we fight through the obstacle, we can get to healing. Hey friend, I know you're hurt, but I'm hurt too. But if we fight through this hurt together, we can get to some healing. I know you've been wounded, but what if we band ourselves together and not just cry about it? What if we try to figure another way out to get to the answer and the solution that we need, so that we don't just cry? If I cry, I want to cry with power. Because after I'm done wiping my tears, I still need an answer. After I'm done wiping my tears, I still need to know how I'm getting out of this problem. And if I can't do it by myself, I want to know who is standing with me to help me push through. And so what they did was they uncovered the roof. They broke up the roof of the house, tearing up the fabric so that they can lower the man down on his pallet into the presence of Jesus. And so when you study what the roofs were made up, it was not just like a curtain you throw over the roof, the structure, and you can just easily pull it off. What it says is that the roof of a typical home in those days was composed of clay tiles. It was composed of clay tiles, which were laid on a mat of branches and grass supported by wooden beams. So it was not an easy, all right, let's lift this up. Give me somebody that's willing to do the work with me. Give me somebody that's willing to sweat through what I am punishing through. Give me somebody that's willing to get dirty in what I am uncomfortable in, or what has been holding me capture and ransom. Who is willing to get dirty with you in this season of your life? And if you can't find 4 out of your 25 friends, who sent them? Do you have 4? Because it will take 6 to carry you if you're dead. Do you have 4? So they got dirty. They broke the roof open. Come on, let's go. They got dirty to break the roof open because this man, this friend of theirs, this person that they had allowed themselves to grow with in relationship with, needed help. So they went up on the roof and lowered him through the tiles after removing it, just like it shows there. Verse 6 says, there were scholars in the room now. There were scholars of the law and the writings of the prophets. The Pharisees were among and within the crowd that Jesus was. And they were the ones that were questioning why, on what authority are you saying what you're saying? All of them were in the same room. Some were coming for answers and solutions, healing and deliverance, and some were coming to judge what was being done. They were within and among, but their motive and intentions were not the same as those who wanted to learn from Jesus' teaching. And so the same group of people would later mock him after they would have seen him do every single thing that he did, the miracles, the fulfillment of all that they were able to see from the hand of Jesus. They were in the room, but not in support of what the man in the room was doing. Who sent you? Who sent you? No, really, who sent you? Why are you here? Why are you in the group that you're in? Why are you in the church that you're in? Why are you in the crowd that you're following? The debate could not be heard. It wasn't loud enough. It wasn't audible what they were saying in their hearts. But Jesus perceived that I know you're present, but there's something on your heart that doesn't register well with me. I see you're clapping and you're shouting, but there's something in your heart that doesn't sit well with what God is doing in this move. I see you show up, but I know there's something in you that contends and opposes what God wants to establish in the house and in this day and for your family. And so we've got to be careful that we're not judging the externals because we don't pay attention to the heart. And he heard because the silence was screaming. Yeah, you're in the room, but are you in the room? You're in the presence, but are you in the presence? You're here, but what are you here for? And so the wrong friend can keep you from getting to your deliverance. What if one of the three decided, hey, this man can do nothing for me, so I'm going to step out? What would it look like if there were, I'm not going to do it, if there were 3 people carrying you on their shoulders? It means there's a part of you that's going to fall. It will also mean that there's going to be an unusual pressure on the 3, but it works better if there were 4. Could you have and count 4 now in your present life and circle as you close this year that would carry you? Can you count 4 that would carry you? So the wrong friend can keep you from getting to your deliverance or prolong your time in captivity. Forgive sins, that's what Jesus did. Remove guilt, nullify the penalty, and assign righteousness. Jesus could have easily healed the man of his sin and sickness, but his friends were needed to get him to Jesus. Jesus could have sent the word. We know he did that. But what if the assessment of this story is an invitation for you to check your community? What if this story was placed in the Bible for you to consider who is your for? What if this story, because the problem was not whether or not Jesus could heal sins. The problem was not whether or not he could heal brokenness or broken bodies. What if this was put there for you to assess your community? For you to assess your crew. Who's going to carry you? Hey, friend. Who sent you? There are a couple of things that we need to, as we build our lives intentionally, not just for the future of ourselves, but for the future of this house and what God is doing, that we do these assessments. We do these assessments. And so if we are building, we've got to build with somebody who is willing to love and to sacrifice for and with you. And so friendship is characterized by self and sacrificial love, where friends are willing to support each other through the hard times. I know it is easy to show up when it's all right. It's easy. But where you at when my back is against the wall? Hey, where you at when I am dealing with the night terrors? Where are you when I'm dealing with something that appears to be greater and bigger than I am? 2 John 15:13 says, Jesus declares, greater love has no man than this, that a friend, one would lay down his life for his friends. And I don't want you to put yourself in the line of fire for me, really, but if you had to, would you? Who sent you? it deals with a great amount of intentionality. It's not enough to have intentions, because everybody has intentions. Even the devil has intentions. And so we can't assess and judge friendships and these relationships and commitment by just intentions. Intentions must be backed by actions and be intentional. It means I can have intentions and not be intentional about it. I can say I'm going to do something and not do it. And so while my intention might be to show up, I don't just want to know what you say you will do. I want to see you do it. I don't want to hear you say, well, I'm a partner. What does a partner look like? What are the expectations of the partnership that we have? Where and how are you showing up for yourself, for your friends, and for the place that God has assigned you to? Intentionality, that's the assessment that we need to do of ourselves. How intentional am I in showing up to this house if I believe that God has sent me to this house? How intentional am I to my friends if I believe that they were the sent ones? How intentional am I to myself? Because I could find myself loving other people because it makes them feel good, and hating myself in secret. Intentions must be backed by actions. Hey friend, who sent you? Where are the actions that are showing up for you in this moment? And so there's a difference between deciding and doing. I can decide to write, but it's a different thing when I begin to write. When I begin to write, it shows that I'm serious about it. But if I just have intentions about writing, it benefits nobody. It may pacify my emotions in this moment, but it does nothing until it's put into action. They did not only decide, these 4 men did not only decide that they were going to get this paralytic man to Jesus, they acted on their actions. Put me in the friendships that will challenge me to grow. And so it should provoke you. If you're building community in these days and in the days ahead of you, you must ensure that you are in the company of those that will provoke you to the place of growth. And so it should provoke you to mature. It should provoke you to, hey, you've done this 100 times, 101 is unacceptable. That's what we're talking about. Don't just leave me in my state where I am going to die. Challenge me out of the low place. Challenge me out of the place that I have become comfortable, that does not serve me and serve the purposes of God for my life. How are you being challenged to maturity so that your soul could be nourished? Because if we don't, then we stay bound longer. The apostle talked about the fact that the deliverance has to do so much with the soul's activity. And so you're telling me that I could be delivered by way of conversation, the right conversation that can come from the right people. And if the right people are sent to me and I receive them, it means that I don't have to stay bound, because the right people will challenge me. You're telling me that I could be healed by association. I could be healed by being in the right atmosphere, in the right company, in the right house, under the right leadership. Absolutely. Because I'm moving not on just what makes my flesh feels good. I'm moving because this is where God has sent me and who God has sent me to. And so the other thing that we've got to ensure that we're intentional about in the days ahead of us is that we're associating with people and places that will hold us accountable. And so accountability must be a part of the equations. And so your friend should hold you accountable, not to your convenience or your biases. Yeah, this is how you feel and this is what you feel because of what you've experienced. But let me introduce you to another way. Let me introduce you to a different way of thinking. Let me introduce you to a different way of acting. Let me introduce you to a different way of being. Not to your offense, not to our offense, but to instructions and corrections. Proverbs 18:24 says, "The man of too many friends chosen is indiscriminately will be broken in pieces and come to ruin. Do you hear me there? Do you hear that? Proverbs 18:24, the man of too many friends chosen indiscriminately will be broken in pieces and come to ruin. But there is a true loving friend who is reliable and sticks closer than a brother. The ruin that we have come to in some cases could have been because of our own discrimination. Because we let everybody in. You tell your secrets to everybody. You allow yourself to become vulnerable in every place, not knowing who sent these people. And so you share your scars with people who don't ever talk about theirs. When all they were doing was gathering information to use against you in another circle, to gather information in what you consider to be a secret and not a secret, to be a safe place. And so we've got to be careful that in our vulnerability that you're not stripping before anybody who is not willing to cover you. You're not revealing yourself in a place that is gathering information to become the text message in another group chat. I want to know who sent you, because the moment I allow myself to become bare before you, I have an expectation that, number one, you're going to hold what I release to you in confidence. Number two, I have an expectation that you're going to challenge me and tell me how and where I went wrong and hold me accountable to what I can correct. But if you're here because you're gathering information, then that's all you're going to do. Hey, you look good, but who sent you? You smell good, but who sent you? I'm going to give you a cue for friendships. If you're the only one who's sharing your secret, stop. That's not your friend. And it should happen little by little. It should happen little by little. I take off a little, you take off a little. I reveal a little, get your mind out of the gutter. But really, it should be like a striptease. Because I'm revealing at the level you're able to handle. And in like manner, you are revealing at the level I'm able to handle. Because the ooh. Could I? The difference between Jesus. Tell them a little at a time. A little at a time. Stop forcing yourself on people. Stop allowing people to force themselves on you. Stop committing to friendships that your heart is not in. Stop committing to places and events that you don't want to be at. Who sent you? You're putting pressure on yourself that you should have been asleep. You should have been resting. You should have been at work. You should have been at home with your family. But you want to please and pacify people who are just looking because you fit their need now. But if I am not sure that you are sent, if I can't trust you with my story and you with mine, then there's no need for us to move any further than this place. Who sent you? Because if I can't trust you to do what you said you will do, then I have to question who sent you. If your actions are not matching what you said with your mouth, then I have every right to call to question what you have said. Who sent you? How much of myself have I revealed to you? How much of my story have you known? Whether I was born into this or I came into this by accident. And what are you doing with my story that I have showed you? Have you still been showing up? Or have you left prematurely because it was no longer easy? Opted out of purpose because it became hard. Curse God because your skin is leprous now. You know, it's no longer easy. It requires work, so I'm an opt-out. You called me to the place of intercession, but you didn't tell me I had to wake up at 5. Nope, find somebody else to do it. Who sent you? I'm going to do it because I'm going to do it only when we have a large audience. But who sent you? Because it's not dependent. The measure is not on who shows up or who does not show up. In this moment, God is looking for more people who are willing to be obedient to the instruction than they are to the accolades and the applause of men. What if when the roof was broken and he was let down, he was still not healed? Would the fall still be the fall if the result was not what they expected? Who sent you? What are you here for? What information are you gathering and what are you doing with it? You are flirting with friendships that don't serve you because you want to be in with the popular crowd. Jealous of people and places that you aspire to and have absolutely no knowledge of the weight that it takes to sit in the space. Everybody wants to sit with apostle. Everybody wants to eat at apostle's table. But can you handle the man that serves the food at the table? Can you handle the man if he allows himself to be undressed in his humanity? Who sent you? What are you gathering information for? Why are you coming here? I'm your friend because I can get a photo opportunity and post it on social media so everybody will know that Rich is my friend. Yeah, but can you carry the weight that is on his shoulder? Have you been graced to carry what he carries? Everybody wants to be pastor to Shara. Everybody wants to lead or may want to lead the women's ministry. But can you sit under the pressure that she sits under? Will you break under what you have been coveting from somebody else? Because if you have not been sent to the office, if you have not been sent to the place, it means that there's absolutely no grace for you to function there. And so I want to assume that the 4 men who were assigned to this crippled man were graced to carry a load that the man could not carry himself. But we are sweating and worried about what everybody else is doing, what they have been graced to do, and stepping into shoes that we can't walk in. Going into rooms that we cannot be trusted with. Conversations that were intended to be confidential, but it becomes the chat in the... Can you carry the weight of that which appears to be dead now? I'm crippled, but I'm not dead. I'm walking in something that appears to be more than I can handle. But if I have a Pastor Matthew beside me, if I have a Pastor Tashara behind me, if I have a Mother Millie on one end who will say, hey, Alain, I know you feel weak right now. If I have a Pastor Rich who is able to come alongside you and say, hey, I know it seems hard, but you've got to keep going. Hey, I know you can't walk right now, but let me carry you while you're unable to carry yourself. Why are you here if you're not going to get me out of this? Why are you here? Why are you here? So the other thing that was interesting about this story is that it sets the stage for the right community. If this picture were to tell a story, the room was filled. Are you trying to tell me that nobody else in this room knew this man? Nobody else in the community knew him? You heard about him and him being sick. You knew he was sick, but you also knew that Jesus was healing. As a matter of fact, all of them were gathered because the fame of Jesus in Galilee had spread. When he cast the demon out of the man, that continued his fame. So every single person that was gathered in the room was as a result of information that they already had. They were there because of information they already had. What they also had was information that there was a man who had a need and a person who could answer and solve the problem. But they were more concerned about getting into the audience for themselves than they. And you know what? Look at them. They were not crippled. They did not need to be healed the way that this man wanted. His case was severe. But there was nobody but four who were willing to go find him and fetch him to the place where he could be delivered. What if what you have been counting as your circle is not your circle? What if they're just attendees in the match? What if they're just cheerleaders? What if they're just patrons to the fight? But they're patrons in the fight and they're shouting and screaming for your opponent. They're in the same arena, but they're not yelling for you. They're yelling for the person that wants to kill you. You hear noise and you're deceived by the noise, but the noise that you're hearing, you have not yet heard the language of the noise, because the language could be, hey, kill him. It may sound like he healed us, but give us Barabbas. He was with me when I was in danger, but give us Barabbas because he no longer serves me now. He was good to me when the money was right, but now that the money has dried up, then give me some. As a matter of fact, I'll build my own. His case was severe. All of them knew what Jesus had the ability to do. And I show up in my brokenness, and nobody made room for me to come into the room. Nobody got up and gave me their chair. Nobody stepped aside so that I can come in and get to my healing. But there were four people who were committed to somebody's story. He found himself four people that were willing to become and deal with a possible opposition, because they knew that I'm in a better place than him, or I know where the answers to what his questions are resides. And so I'm going to go the extra mile to ensure that my friend doesn't die in the low place. I'm going to ensure that I fight the battles that are before him, because I have heard of where the answer is, and I know who has the problem. How can I get you from your problem to the solution? They dug the roof. Ain't nobody climbing on a roof to dig it open for nobody. But these four, look at them, dug it open. I'm going to tell you one story. So community matters. We're in this room together, but all of us may not have the same motive for being in the room. We may show up here every Sunday, but what's our motive? Why are you here? Why do you come? Why do you show up? What's your motive? What's your agenda? What is it that you're trying to do and accomplish? If you were not sent by God, you might as well leave. Because when it gets bloody, what happens? When it gets bloody and difficult, what happens? Community matters. And so our problem in church and in a human problem in general is that when we find ourselves in the crippled place, we isolate ourselves. We run into isolation. But what I discovered is that social isolation as a problem, according to DSM-5, I'm going to always reflect to the DSM-5. I do the work. And so the DSM-5 tells us, that's the you can call it the mental health dictionary. What it tells us is that when I find myself with people who are continuously isolating themselves, I mash your toe in church, so I stay home for 3 weeks. They didn't call me to pray, so I stopped coming. They didn't recognize me, so I found another church. I did this. I came here with my accolades and my certification, but nobody in this house acknowledges me. Well, as a hiring manager, if somebody comes to me and they sit in my office and we're doing an interview, even if they have worked in the same environment before, you've not worked in this one before. So even though we're doing the same thing or you've done the same thing, you've never done it here before. And so what that looks like is if I'm coming into this environment, I'm coming into this community, I'm coming into this room, I submit myself to the order of the house. And so I abase myself, because while I have done it before, I've never done it this way before. While I've been exposed and I've stood on a stage and a microphone before, I've never done it before. And so I'm studying first the order of the place that I was sent to before I try to assimilate a place to be seen and heard. Who sent you? Because if you're sent by God, you're going to be willing to sit down and be quiet for a moment. If you're sent by God, you're going to be willing to submit yourself to instruction, because you can come with a wealth of knowledge and the wrong attitude, and it becomes a stench in the presence of the Lord. The Lord is looking for a community of people who will understand what it is to stick it out in the hard times, and not just stick through the plan, but to find somebody who is in need of what you have access to. How many people in New York City are craving what you take for granted? How many people have not yet had an experience of what deliverance looked like, even though they've been in God? But we take it for granted as a people. Who sent you? Because if you were sent by God and what He has sent you to be exposed to has benefited you, who have you helped to get to the help that you got when you came here? Community. So the DSM-5 links isolation to, first of all, it's a mental health disorder. They linked it to depression, anxiety, PTSD, even suicide. Because if you isolate yourself because of how you've been hurt, how will you be helped? If you decide to stay home because you are offended, how are you going to come out of offense? Because when you're offended, the persons you will call are the other ones who are and have been offended. So who's helping you? When your group is built on offense, who is correcting who? Trauma bonds. And nobody is helping nobody. Everybody has decided that because we were hurt the same way, according to the way we told the story, I'm going to stay crippled. I'm going to stay in my low place and I'm going to cry myself to sleep every night because this is what's familiar to me. Hey, Fee, did he hurt you? Yeah, he hurt me too. Let's sit and cry about it. Who is helping who? All right, you're a single mother. I'm a single mother too. I hate men. You hate men too. All right, let's go to tea. Who is helping who? Who sent you? Who sent you? What's your assignment in my life? What's your assignment in this house? Psalm 68:6 says, God sets the lonely in families. It means that if you feel isolated because of hurt, I'm going to say, hey, you're isolated, you're hurt, you're offended. Come, let me tell you something different. What if you're offended because you assessed that thing wrong? What if you're offended because your interpretation of what was said may have been incorrect? I'm not trying to discredit what you felt and how you felt, but let me introduce you to another way of thinking so that even while you process your hurt, you don't stay hurt. Who sent you? Because if my conversation is, that Prophet Alain doesn't know how to speak to people. He spoke to me like that too? Yeah. Grow up. Because the only load you're carrying can't just be yours. The only weight you're carrying can't just be yours. Because in flight, they says if they ever hit a moment of danger and they lose oxygen levels, the oxygen will drop. But it doesn't end when you get help. It ends when you help the person next to you. They say, put your own oxygen mask on first. You get the healing that you need first. And then ensure that the person next to you doesn't die when there's access to oxygen. And so that your family doesn't stay at home and die when there's oxygen being released in this house. And so that the people on your block don't die on the block when you have answers and solutions that they can benefit from. He sets the lonely in families and leads the prisoners and leads the prisoners out with singing. 1 Thessalonians 5:11 says, so speak encouraging words to one another. You see what it says? Speak encouraging words to one another. How could we break this roof? I know we showed up to the door and the door was closed. There were so many people in the way that we couldn't enter by way of the door. But how else could we get this problem solved? How else could we get this solution figured out? Speaking encouraging words to one another. Build up hope so you'll all be together in this. No one left out. No one left behind. I know you're already doing this. Just keep on doing it. Do you hear me, all nations? Just keep on doing it. Proverbs 17:17 tells us that a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. Who is sticking with you when adversity strikes your house? The only thing friends will do, according to this story, is create an opportunity. The door was closed, it was blocked, there's no way in. They created an opportunity for their friend, their brother, to get to Jesus. Instead of passively waiting for help, the paralytic man's friends actively took steps to get him to Jesus, showing the importance of taking actions and addressing challenges. You can't just be offended at what challenges you. You've got to address it. The crowd was too big and the man's legs were too weak. What is the opportunity that could have been created? It required that they would break the roof, get their hands dirty because somebody needed help and they knew where the help was. Your cry to God will beckon a response, but what he will always do is send help. I said what he will always do is send help, but guess what? The idea and this question of who sent you is not an isolated one to this story. In Exodus 3:7-10, it chronicles the story of, let me quickly read it. The Message says, and God said, I've taken a good long look at the affliction of my people in Egypt. We know the story. And I've heard their cries for deliverance from their slave masters. I know all about their pain, and now I have come down to help them. Pry them loose from the grip of Egypt. Get them out of the country and bring them to a good land with wide open space, a land lush with milk and honey, a land of the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Verse 9 and 10 says, the Israelites' cry for help has come up to me, and I've seen for myself how cruelly they've been treated by the Egyptians. It's time for you to go back. I am sending you. What would have happened if Moses had gone without being sent? Where would his backing have been? And so he said, if they ask, you let them know I sent you. Because they will want to know who you are and who sent you. But this is your answer. I sent you. So that the authority in which you show up is validated because I know the person that sent you. Your captors will question who sent you. Demons will ask that too. Who sent you? And they'll tell you to leave us alone. It feels good in darkness. It feels good in bondage because it's familiar. Who sent you? And when the captors ask, Exodus 5:1-2 says, after Moses, we know that's the conversation that Moses had. And he says, tell them I sent you. In Exodus 5:1-2, it says, after Moses and Aaron approached Pharaoh, they said, God, the God of Israel says, free my people so that they can hold a festival for me in the wilderness. A festival in the wilderness? You mean I can celebrate while things are still not perfect? A festival in the wilderness? And you want to cut yourself in the wilderness, and God says, celebrate in the wilderness? Huh? A festival in the wilderness? Pharaoh said, and who is God that I should listen to him and send Israel off? I know nothing of this so-called God, and I'm certainly not going to send Israel off. The question of who sent you is necessary. The question of who sent the people around you is a necessary one. Even the Pharisees asked Jesus, what are your credentials? Mark 11:27 and 28. What are your credentials? What are your credentials? If you have 3, it's okay. Because I know of a story where 3 were cast into something. Who sent you? Daniel 3, I'm going to close with this thought. Daniel 3:24 to 26 says, astonished, King Nebuchadnezzar stood up in terror and asked his advisors, didn't we throw 3 men into the fire? It took 4 to get the paralytic man to Jesus. But there's another story that says there were 3 that were cast into the fire. There were 3 that were cast into fire that should have killed them. It says, did we not throw 3 men into the fire bound firmly with ropes? In reply, they told the king, yes, your majesty. Look, he told them, I see 4 men walking. I see 4. We put 3 in trouble. But now I see 4. Where did the 4th man come from? I see 4 men walking around untied and unharmed in the middle of the fire, and the appearance of the 4th resembles a divine being. Ladies and gentlemen of all nations worship assembly, I want you to know that you have no deficiency even if you have 3. Even if all you can see right now is 3 and you are in the fire, I promise you that there's a 4th man in the story. But you can't jump out of the fire premature of the 4th man showing up. And if you find yourself on a bed of affliction and you don't have 4 and you only have 3, there's a 4th called Jesus. And if you have 4, then you can count the 5th as the back end. Because what we absolutely know for a fact is that the God that you serve will show up, and when he shows up, he will ensure that the deficiency is handled. He will ensure that what held you captive no longer has a hold over your life and your story. You may have started this year with 3, but I promise you, you're not ending with 3. You may have been questioning where your support was, but I want you to know that your support is here. I want you to know that your help is in the room. You may have counted and looked around and measured who you helped and how many times you've helped them. But I want you to know that your 4th man is about to pop up. Before this year ends, you will know what it looks like to be carried, and you will know what it looks like to be helped. Yes, your majesty, look. He told them, I see 4 men walking untied and unharmed in the middle of the fire. You're about to be loosed in the fire. You're about to be loosed in the fire. And what it continues to say is this, and the appearance of the 4th resembles a divine being. Then Nebuchadnezzar approached the opening of the blazing fire furnace. He shouted out, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He shouted out, in this house your own name, whatever your name is. Servants of the Most High God, come out. Come out, all nations. Get up from your bed of affliction, all nations. Come out from the fire, all nations. You were in it, but it didn't burn you. Come out. It's time to come out. It says, come here, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire. Hear me, somebody. What started with 3 will end with 4. What started as a problem ends in a solution. What started as a deficiency ends in a surplus. It says there were 3 men in the fire until there were 4. There were 3 men that came to your aid until the divine being showed up. There were 4 that carried you, but there's another one that comes to the aid of this house and to these people. Where are your 4? Could you stand to this room, everybody? As prophetic significance, I want you to get in groups of 4. Because you don't know what the next person in that 4 is dealing with, that they want to be carried over, but they're ashamed to talk about it because of how you have judged them in previous seasons. Come on. Where are your 4? Or, where is my number 4? Are you designed to carry me? Or you've been designed to show up in the fire? I want you to take turns going around in those groups. And in the place of prayer, I want you to carry that person. Carry each other. Come on, open your mouth. Who are you carrying? How are you carrying them? I want to ensure that this circle, this 4 that I'm building also cannot be penetrated. Because what friendship also, when you study the word, it talks about a barrier, a barricade, a wall. And if the circle is built correctly, it cannot be penetrated. You've got to build with the right people. Come on, carry that person. Take turns and pray. Take turns. I don't know what you're dealing with. I don't know how long you've been dealing with it. I don't know how you've been in isolation, how you've been handling your isolation. But here's what I know. You can't go to the future in isolation. You can't go to your next thinking that you can fight this one by yourself. You can't go to tomorrow thinking that you have all the answers and the solutions independent of community. God wants to ensure that there are absolutely no breaches. Can I trust you with what I've been crying over? Yeah. Come on, raise your voices in this room. Raise your voices in this room. The noise, I could just imagine the noise on the inside of the room while they stood outside with this paralytic man who could not. What if they were banging on the door and nobody could hear them? What if the only reason that the door was not open was because they were not crying loud enough? What if a way was not made because nobody could hear them because they did not open their mouths loud enough? What if they had pushed the door a little bit harder for it to pry open? Come on, somebody open your mouth and push in the place of prayer. Father, we thank you. Come on, the word of the Lord declares that when Zion cries, when Zion travails, surely she shall bring forth. Come on, let the cries of a bush be heard in this room. I don't know what you have been, what has paralyzed you, what has rendered you immobile, but you've got to press, you've got to push. Come on, crack the roof open, crack the ceiling open. There's an answer and the solution you've got to get to. Come on, in the balcony, all over this room, push, open your mouth. Come on, increase the volume. Increase the volume that comes out of your mouth. You're not going to die on this cot. You're not going to die in this place when there's help. Come on, who sent you? Yeah, you've been sent to the right room. This is a birthing room for you. You've been sent here according to the divine plan and the purposes of God. And because you're in here, you're not going to die here, but you've got to build correctly. Come on, I don't hear you. Come on. Come on, raise your voice. Lift your voice like a trumpet in this room. Come on. Father, we thank you that there is help in the room. 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 Somebody needs a push. Somebody needs a push. Come on, there's help here. There's help here. You can let go. But I want to deal with those of you who have found yourself in places where it feels as though you've been abandoned. You don't know where your 4 is. You can't even find 3. Nobody to encourage you in your low place. Nobody to carry you. Nobody to encourage you. Nobody to push you. Come on, but there's somebody that was sent in this room today to help get you. I'm willing to work with you until the roof is open and you come into healing. Until you come into deliverance. Come on, there's help in the room. How can we push you today? Will you throw your hands up all over this room? You're in this room and you need personal prayer along the lines of anything that you've heard today. Come to the altar quickly. We're going to worship our way out of this. And if that's you, you don't know where your 4 is, you can't even find 3. You find yourself dealing with situations that appear to be bigger than you. Come. There's somebody that was sent in this room to get you over this hump that you find yourself in. Let's worship him. Let's worship him together. Would you lift your hands?
I will lift up mine eyes to the hills, from which cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord which made heaven and earth. He said, he will not suffer thy foot to be moved. The Lord that keepeth thee, he will not slumber nor sleep. For the Lord is thy keeper, the Lord is thy shade. Come on. Upon thy right hand, upon thy right hand, for the sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. He shall preserve thy soul, even forevermore.
Throw your hands in the air.
My help.
You're not gonna die in the low place.
My help. All of my help coming from the Lord. Come on, everybody, lift your voice and say, I will lift up mine eyes to from which cometh my help cometh from. My help cometh from the Lord which made heaven, the Lord which made heaven and earth.
Help is in the room.
He said, he will not suffer thy foot to be. The Lord that keepeth thee, the Lord that keepeth thee, he will not slumber, he